Hey guys, welcome back to Anchored and Devoted. I'm Pastor Jer.
Whoop whoop. And I'm Pastor Joseph, anchored and devoted.
Anchored and Devoted. We're going to get into another ticklish topic today. And we don't know where this is going. Because Dave and I were talking, and he said, "What are we talking about?" I said, "Let's talk about racism." He said, "What about racism?" I said, "Well, what is it?" And he says, "What it is?" I said, "Yeah. What is it? What is it not? Let's see if we can parse that out. Let's see where this goes." So, if this is a conversation that might trigger you, here's your warning. Beep, 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 beep. If this is something that might make you upset, you know what? Okay.
How do you know if that'll trigger them or not? Like, what does that mean?
I think I've seen where on both sides of the racism conversation, what I've observed is that there's a feeling that if you overdefine something or misdefine something that is not racist as racism, that there's an offense that's done, potentially even a harm that's assumed to be with that offense. And on the other side, if you define something as not racist, when in fact it is racist, you can have the same sort of experience. And I guess what I mean by triggered is I think this is something that people are going to continue to feel very deeply and passionately about. And frankly, I'm one of them. I may not feel or think the same things. The same issues may not be on my radar that are on someone else's radar. But I am very passionate about racism, about having conversations about identifying it properly. So one of the things that I've learned to do over my extensively long life,
all 2,000 years,
all 2,000 plus a few minutes here and there.
This is so
and y'all have seen this on A&D before, but I think that words used properly, defined, and used in their context is really, really important. So that's where I'm coming from with this. I think it's important to define well, correctly, and accurately what racism is, what it's not, and to distinguish it from other things that might be in parallel in a conversation with racism, like bias or discrimination or hate or inequity or injustice or appropriation or a number of different topics that can all kind of be couched as racism. But I don't find it to be a helpful way of doing it. I don't find it to be a helpful way of having a conversation. I find that to be a helpful way of... We can?
I don't know. I'm trying to understand where we're going.
Yeah. Well, I guess here's my basic question is, from your perspective, how do you define racism? And I'm happy to answer that question first.
Okay, go for it.
Throw this at you. Sure. Okay. So racism is a belief that based on the cultural origin of a person or a persons, that there is an inherent value distinction between individual people based on their cultural origin. I find that to be reprehensible. I believe it is completely contrary to Scripture, completely unbiblical, and an absolute sin. I hate the word racism when we talk about this because I think it too is a misnomer. As far as I'm concerned, there is a human race and there's a bunch of other races of species. But when we talk about racism, we're not talking about like I'm a person and that is a dog, and so I hate it because it's a dog. In fact, most people who are racists probably love their dogs too. I don't think that's a particular problem of those who might be racist. Okay. But when we discuss what racism is, it's something that happens within the human race, where I, as an individual, look at you as an individual or as a group of people and say there is a fundamental distinction between you and I based on something that is inheritable in your genes that makes you inferior and me superior. Because I'm superior and you're inferior, therefore, your life is of lesser value than mine. I deserve not just differently, but more, better than you.
So my definition of racism has to do with power, and that's why I mentioned it earlier. You know, you can, and I guess this is the difference between a racist versus racism. So a racist is, I think, what you were defining, someone who personally does not like me because I'm African American, which is this unique flavor of labeling that the U.S. likes. Because my dad's from the West Indies, my mom's from the Carolinas, and
both of those are in Africa, right?
Yeah, and the reality for me is that I'm born in DC, and I don't know what you're thinking, but your thinking clearly has you set in opposition to me, even though we're not warring or enemies. You know, whether you think I'm going to replace you or take your job or whatever, these are all things that come from media and other places and is woefully fully a lie. It's a racist is a person that simply doesn't like another individual because of their skin, this tiny thin layer that holds all the germs away and keeps the good stuff on the inside, is why a person doesn't like you. So that is what a racist, kind of like the foundational stuff. But understand, for a racist to exist, often they've been there's been some community encouragement for this type of thinking, whether it's through family or through indoctrination, education. And so that gets more to racism, which is a layered, power-centered push to separate people based off of their skin color, where the power is shifted away from one group so that other groups feel more empowered, instead of everyone seeing themselves as equal under the eyes of God. There are ways in which, racists will rationalize the thinking so that racism is okay. There is a clear breakdown of this when you look at scripture and see in the New Testament that when two brothers come together and they're of different races, they are to treat one another as brothers, not as whatever structure they've been placed into, but they are to love genuinely as Christ has loved them. So racism doesn't have a space, just as racists don't have a space before the throne of grace.
Completely agree.
And I do believe there will be many people surprised when they stand before God and realize that they missed the mark because they love themselves well and did not know Christ. And in loving themselves or placing themselves in the center of the conversation, it was easy then to be a racist. That to me is the definition of a racist, is someone who is genuinely self-centered. And they're just looking for ways to label others to keep them in the box beneath them as others. Once we have to, break that box and you become my brother and I know you, and, whether it's like with Samaritan, I've actually touched you and taken you to be bound, or I've gone into my wallet to make sure the expenses are covered, where I've changed my plans to say I'm going to come back to settle accounts. I have now come past that place of other, to you being my genuine neighbor who I must love, you being my brother or future brother or sister in Christ. So yeah, is that good enough for you?
All of that, I agree with everything that you said there, but the inclusion of the dynamic of power is one that I didn't fully understand. Let me tell you what I understood you to say, and maybe that will help me understand or us understand where I missed something. I heard you say that there are some essential components that define a racist. There's an othering that goes on. There's a selfishness that promotes an othering. That in a racist is going to look at the color of skin. Okay, we got that. Racism itself is the propagation of that, if you will, ideology through whatever the cultural connection is, whether it's family or society, or talked about indoctrination. We saw this with, say, Hitler Youth. But when you talked about power, you said, and didn't quite understand this, you said that there is a power dynamic where power has shifted from one group to another.
So
I guess my question is, what is the essential property of power in this equation?
And so what you're sitting on is the difference between prejudice and racism. So if a person is prejudiced, right, against me, they have some preconceived opinion or information or whatever.
Sure.
And you could say they are racist, but they're genuinely just prejudiced. They have no power at all in the community or anything. They have no ability to speak or place me in prison or tax me or do anything to me, right? They're just prejudiced. That's their thing. Once they have power, whether it's, a police officer or a tax person or a judge or lawyer or teacher or someone who has the ability to deny me the same ability that someone else would have of a different race. Now we're getting into the world of racism. When you see a flight attendant who won't let me move to a different seat because whatever the reason is, but honestly it's because of my skin color, and it could be racist or other things, could be a different reason, but understand that power that they wield right there is what allows it to be racist, right? If we're in the middle of a field and they have nothing to do with me and I have nothing to do with them, then they're just prejudiced. That's the difference. They don't like me, still the same, but they have no ability to impact my world at all. They are just another individual. Did I answer that okay? Is that your question?
So here,
or did I dig the hole deeper?
Well, I guess this is a part of what I want to get at is...
And prejudices can be positive and negative.
What you describe... Sorry, say that again?
Prejudices can be positive and negative, even when it comes to looking...
For sure, yeah. So my understanding of prejudice, my definition here, again, because definitions are really important to me, is a prejudice is a prejudgment. Oftentimes based on the stereotype. I see you, I've seen someone who looks like you, they are my stereotype. I assume that the qualities that my archetype has, you will also have. So if my archetype, being large, black, and beautiful, likes watermelon, then I will look at you and prejudge that you also like watermelon.
Yes, again, that would
Just to
definitely
use an easy trope
that's
here.
a prejudice. That would be definitely a prejudice. If you then stated, "I will not let Dave buy any watermelon because of X,
Uh-huh.
Y, Z." Now, again, you're impeding. You're in a place of position of power. Now that moves to racism.
See, I disagree with
Okay,
that.
go ahead and explain.
Because of this, I can have a prejudice and not see a necessary distinction between you and I based on color, but because I have a wrong prejudice based on a stereotype. And what I have done, if I'm precluding, okay, the question is, why am I precluding? And to state that it's racist because I'm doing this based on a stereotype, I think makes too many connections.
Okay, I see it as, again, if you are intentionally making a decision based off of my race to deny me something, or again, this is for me when it comes to racism, power is a big part of it. If you're ignorant, that's your choice. Like that's, just because you desire to help me out and it is actually harmful doesn't mean like it doesn't take away the fact you were being racist. Like
that's a part of what I'm getting at. Because if the example here is, instead of me precluding you from having watermelon, whatever it might be, if instead of that, what I'm doing is I'm serving you inordinate amounts of watermelon because I believe that's what you want, and I'm trying to be generous to you with something that I believe you like, it's still based on a prejudice.
Right, but that's not racist.
But it's coming from a place. What's that?
That's different because now I have the option to say yes. Right. And so the power is shifted. That's a different conversation. I can now choose whether to eat it or not. I didn't have an option before. Right. So yes, you could overload my front yard with it and it could be irritating to the hilt and I could be mad with you. But the reality is I didn't have the power to say no. I couldn't sell them. I couldn't do anything. I was just stuck. And so if it flopped the other way, it's not racism. It's yes, you're prejudiced. Yes, because again, it's positive. But when it's a withdrawing and a holding back, and that's the issue. Does that make sense or no?
Okay. Yes, that makes sense. And I agree with that. So the question of power, then, one being, as you said, an important question. I think it's one that I wanted to understand and press on this more, because I'm not sure that I may not be fully understanding.
That's fine. I'm fine to flesh it out. Give me another example or ask a question.
Well, when we talked about the example that you gave a little earlier, you and I are in a field. I have no power, except, between you and me.
Right.
The advantage is very definitely on your side.
Again, and that's why you can say whatever you want, and you can say, air quote, racist things, right? Like, because our culture has labeled them as such.
Sure.
But the reality is you can go your way, I can go my way. Like, you're not stopping me from anything, and I'm not stopping you from it.
That is true, but I can also attempt to stop you. I can attempt to deprive you of life or liberty without having any power.
How?
Simply based on the prejudice or the hatred that I have in my heart, I can simply go and attack you. I can go can they?
Yes, but then you would be wielding power. There is, whether it's with a gun or a knife or whatever, if you are looking to harm people of another race because of your prejudices, understand that the liberties that you have in this amazing country allow you to do that. Is that acceptable unto God? I find it hard to see how anyone can make it to heaven. Who does that? But God is much more amazing than I. So I cannot speak on his behalf. I will not fall into that trap. But no, if it takes a rich man with the abilities to get a camel through the eye of a needle, I'm sure this would require some Disney-esque manipulation to get them into heaven. It's if I'm smaller than you, which I'm not, and you are trying to harm me, now there's power in the conversation. Whether you're harming me, you are in my physical space, you have laid hands on me or rocks or whatever. Again, that is where the power has shifted. I can't say no to that, right? Whether you've brought out a gun or whatever, I can't say no. And so I don't have that ability to engage on a fair field. That is definitely a place where racism has taken place.
Okay.
Right? The same is true if I went to the bathroom and there was a water fountain for you that said white and a water fountain for me that said black. Again, I don't have an option. No one's going to be mad at you for drinking in my water fountain. Right. So it's not both ways where I can go to your water fountain and it's okay.
It is certainly not the same.
So
there might be plenty of people who would be okay with you drinking from mine. And there might be a few people who are upset with you from drinking from mine. But yes, the expectation.
Correct.
I think we could take for granted is going to be different.
Correct. And so
when you talk about power, then it sounds like, at least on the granular level, when we talk about power, we're talking about violating a person's autonomy.
Correct.
Violating and aggressing past a proper boundary. That's not mine to do. I mean, I don't have any inherent power as you and I are walking through a field. There's no distinction of power between us. I mean, you're bigger than I am. You're faster than I am. You can see better than I can, but that doesn't stop me from pulling out something that can overpower you.
If I'm relaxing or whatever.
That takes the choice out of your hands to be engaged. You must be engaged at that point. And that's a violation. That's a use of power, whether it's a usurpation of power or a use of power that's already granted.
Well, there's no ability for me to engage with you in that context. You didn't say, hey, I'm going to fight you. Would you like to fight?
Yeah, let's flip a coin, see which way this goes.
But like, I didn't...
Like, heads we fight, tails we don't.
And I know it sounds silly, but I mean, if you're fighting anyone else, they typically kind of understand there's the ability to walk away. I wouldn't have that ability based off of our conversation. If I'm attacked.
Help me understand that, because I'm not sure I'm following that. How if I'm walking through the field, if you're walking through the field and
you pick up a rock, you said Cain and Abel. You pick up a rock and hit me on the back of the head.
Right.
I did not get an option to walk away. Right?
Okay. But that's going to be true of whoever it is they hit in the back of the head.
Exactly. The thing was, you stated was in your heart there was a thinking directed specifically toward my race. Okay, well then, if it was because of money or something else, then it's still murder, yes. But that's the reason. Your reasoning here was simply race. That's where it becomes a racist thing, right? You've been encouraged, taught, conditioned, whatever. You're prejudiced. All of a sudden, you start to influence or move into my life in a way in which I lose my ability to, whether it's speak, whether it's live, whether it's, just engage with things that others should be able to engage with freely.
So when you say power, it sounds like another synonym here would be to dominate. Whatever I'm doing that seeks to dominate you, I may have a reason for it. That reason might be greed, it might be apathy, but it could also be simple hatred because of the color.
Right, and then it would be a racist thing.
Right.
And so when you look at redlining back in the day, there was a clear, conscious effort by both government, state, and lenders, along with realtors, to cordon off people based off of the color of their skin and not permit them to move into areas for which they could afford. It wasn't just the typical market of supply and demand. It was a maneuvering to make it so that those who could afford it stayed in their quote position, where they were believed to be, based off of the prejudices that people held. And so the power was in the system to make sure that individuals didn't move past the prejudices. So that there's these things can be broken down and have been dismantled, and you still see some lingering impacts of redlining.
But you can systematize domination.
Yes, you can. And
but it starts at the individual level, and then can then be built into a system, whether that's
familial,
a community, or society, or a legal system.
And that's how I believe racism works. It starts off as prejudices that are shared and encouraged, and yes, most of them are out of ignorance, but they still are shared and encouraged and treated as truths until they become law. And you end up with unhealthy relationships for both sides. There isn't a winner in this. Yeah.
How long have we gone?
25 minutes.
25 minutes? Okay. Well, I agree with everything you said.
That was interesting, but now you understand.
No, seriously, I appreciate. So I don't want to make this another 15 minutes. When I read, in some places, when I read about power, there is an assertion. There may also be an assumption that racism can only take place in an area where there is a power dynamic, and the power dynamic can necessarily only go one way. Therefore, racism can necessarily only go one way.
Oh, I understand the question.
Well, I mean, I haven't laid a question out there. I disagree with that assertion. I agree with what you've said, because I think we've worked through to a good, useful definition that whenever I ask an individual or I ask a community, regardless of the size of this community, view you as other, and then seek to dominate over you because of the color of your skin, I'm operating in racism. Mm-hmm. And the antidote for that, then, is not to adjust power or to adjust the power dynamic. The antidote to that is to remove, or allow to be removed, the values judgment that I have come to the table with. That you are necessarily less valuable because you are different than me.
Yes.
I have a mind divided right now, Dave, because I'm listening to the thunder. It's roaring outside my window right now. I'm like, don't lose connection.
We're fine. I think we've covered the subject well enough.
This has been useful. It's been, hopefully no one's been triggered.
I'd say that's when you asked in the beginning, I was like, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but what? Yeah. I hope this has been helpful. I mean, biblically speaking, and we hit this earlier, Christ is what should define us, not anything else. So everything else should fall to the side when we say we are a follower of Christ. And the tough part is reconciling and recognizing that we still have the old nature and a lot of the old prejudices in our mind, even though we are new believers. And so we need to pause, and take everything to God for evaluation, with the clarity of grace of the cross in front of us and the expansion of family through faith that He allowed us in, and recognizing with clarity that those things that we grew up in might not be and often aren't things we should hold on to, but we should hold on to love.
Yeah, that's really what my heart is, because again, I am passionate about this for that reason. We can either be children of God or it can be children of the devil. If we are children of God and we have the same Father, as we so often say here in the podcast, two brothers, different mothers, but the same Father, there is no othering that is allowed. There is no othering that is possible any longer. It has been completely removed because we've been adopted into His family. And there is no room any longer for the things that I brought into this when I was adopted into the family, the views, the perspectives, the prejudgments, prejudices. There's no room for that any longer for me to hold on to and say, yeah, but I still have my foot over here in my white Aryan upbringing or in my whatever my culture is. The beautiful thing about the cross is that it removes all of that and places us into a totally new family, which when I found that to be a lovely, lovely home to dwell in, where I can have more fraternity than anywhere else. And that's what I want for people who look like me and people who don't look like me.
Especially when you understand we're going to spend eternity together. So we should act like family now, right? We should go deep in relationship, have real conversation.
Make some things a lot less awkward.
I mean, I know we get new bodies, but I don't want to be meeting everybody new when I get there. Man, I got two friends. Jesus and the Holy Spirit. Like, oh no, need one more. But no, really, we should be bold when it comes to engaging with other believers and the knowledge that we are family. From being vulnerable with our brokenness to, living out the fruits of the Spirit courageously. And that includes having conversations that are uncomfortable and getting uncomfortable with others because we no longer need to fear them or death because we have God. There we go.
Well, I want to thank you guys for coming along on this unscripted, unplanned ride through this field. We are Anchored and Devoted. We love you. We're grateful that you stopped by. If you want to reach out to us, you can do so at anchoredanddevoted@gmail.com. We'd love to connect with you. Great. Love money. Until the next time, go with God.